Welcome to this morning's podcast of October 25th, 2019. This is Gregory Tomachow, and today we will be discussing the refugee crisis in Europe and the process for which these immigrants must endure in order to be accepted into foster countries. Here with us today is the chief of the International Organization for Migration in the European Union, Elizabeth Wang. Welcome. She has been working for the organization for the last 29 years and is here to provide us with some background on who exactly decides where these migrants go and who is responsible for them. Elizabeth, who decides asylum status and what are some factors that the decision considers?
Well, to answer your question, Gregory, although most of the foster nations are part of the European Union, when it comes to immigration, individual nations still have the full say in their policies of whether or not to receive, or if so, how many immigrants. However, we tend to see a larger concentration of asylum seekers in coastal countries like Italy and Greece, where it is much easier for immigrants to settle and the nation's border protection is often overrun. As a mediator between nations, my team and I also looked at a country's MyPEX ranking, which is an immigration index that shows which nations has the most accepting laws when it comes to immigrants, so we are not forcing any nation to take unwanted citizens. We also want to ensure that once an immigrant has relocated, that they have the equal status compared to every other citizen, and that when their homeland is safe to return to, the foster country may relinquish its free aid, which includes healthcare, welfare, education, and residence permits. And this is why in 2011, the EU passed the Qualification Directive, which was later renewed in 2016, with the key ideas that a country holding refugees only need to ensure protection as long as the harm and conflict persists in the origin country.
Well, thank you for all this information regarding the accepted immigrants, but naturally in this process, only some of the applicants will be permitted to enter Europe with their new refugee status, while others face the hard consequences of rejection. What happens to these people, and what options do they have after this result?
Many countries allow their applicants to appeal for asylum after denial, although with limited time and attempts. In Greece, for example, the affirmative application for asylum is sent to the appeals authority, where the application for asylum has a chance to explain the applicant's case, find witnesses, and participate in a hearing before the appeals committee. While many fail to appeal successfully, individuals who are denied but not rejected often remain in the country. Although there are growing rates of rejected applications, programs are being created to more efficiently accept immigrants in need. However, Italy's humanitarian protection is decreasing its amount of applicants, and as many of these European nations do not have the capacity to accept countless immigrants, they have shown their support of the immigrants' countries by setting up refugee camps so that the immigrants can still receive some type of aid and protection.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now with me is Ratan Maya, an immigrant who was recently rejected for his last appeal attempt to renew his visa in Italy, despite explaining the political status and violence in his country of origin, Syria. His father and uncle were publicly executed 3 years ago for trying to help others flee the country. His only family left, his 2 sisters and mother, were able to flee to Bangladesh, where they are living now. Maya was lucky enough to escape across the Mediterranean, where he has been working in Italy to sustain for his family. However, his living permit is due to expire, and he fears that if he has to return to his home country, he would be walking into death. Hello, Mr. Maya. Could you briefly summarize your experience as a refugee in Europe so far? What is your plan after not being able to obtain a visa in Italy?
Thank you for asking. My legal permit in Italy is about to expire, although I've lived here legally for the past 3 years. For now, I will continue living in the country, but after my document expires, I won't have any rights to have a job or a stable place to live. My family is still living in Bangladesh, but as long as I could, I won't tell them that I filled my application for asylum since they're counting on me.
Do you think the government could be more effective in handling the refugee statuses?
I hope that the government could address the actual conditions of people like me who are seeking refuge and bringing attention to the rest of the world. These European countries could also open up more programs that protect people whose lives are in danger, instead of sending them back or allowing them to live invisibly in this society.
As many other asylum seekers in denial, Maya would become an undocumented immigrant in Italy and would be forced to join the thousands wondering what to do next. Without any rights or protection in their new country, these people either go back home or try to enter the nation illegally. Refugees that are rescued lack citizenship and working licenses. On top of that, the majority do not even speak the common language and lack money to sustain their own lives. Currently, Turkey, Pakistan, Lebanon, and Serbia host the majority of refugees in the world. These countries have established a system of refugee camps which are hastily constructed to provide immediate protection and shelter for refugees. Once a person becomes a refugee, they're likely to remain a refugee for many years. In the refugee camps, people are taught by volunteers from all around the world basic education such as English, math, and personal financial management. They are later recruited from a waiting list to conduct a simple labor task job. As adult refugees undergo the struggles of seeking asylum and a way for living, the effect of seeking refuge is amplified on children and young adults. It may seem surprising, but over 50% of all refugees are in fact children. Life as a refugee is hard enough as it is, let alone being a child with little to no way to support yourself. For this podcast, we invited 11-year-old Alex Flynn, a refugee, to share his experiences of what it is like taking on the responsibilities of a father. Is it different from that of your family or other adults? Alex?
I just started working a few small jobs this year since I feel like I'm old enough to begin supporting my family. I feel lucky to have my family here so we could help each other, since some of the teenagers at my workplace have to take care of themselves completely. Some kids I know came here alone since their families wanted the best future for the younger ones. We don't get to make as much as our parents since our employers pay us less because of our age.
Other than being forced to work for lower pay, the difference between behavior towards refugee children and adults is nothing, and this is one of the problems. The children are expected to work the same hours and complete the same tiring tasks. After what you heard today, here are some questions to keep your brain turning. Are these first world European countries at fault for having to reject immigrants? Should a nation be allowed to choose whether or not if it wants to help immigrants? And does the process need to be more enforced or changed to efficiently accept as many immigrants in need as possible? Thank you, and I will see you next week on this morning's podcast.